So, Your Honor, what is being printed is which we will mark, will be the front of the hoodie. The purpose of Exhibit ZZZ and the one that is being printed is to show and to give the court, and we're going to request to give to the jury the complete picture and the complete true story about these holes in the hoodie that were presented as if they were caused in some manner by something else other than the
So
criminals.
that seems perfectly reasonable, and I'd be inclined to do that.
I appreciate that, Your Honor. And here is the reason for the motion for a mistrial with prejudice. On its own, to do this, and you put together all of the parts of what just occurred. You start with the fact that and if I could, Your Honor, now that I have it yet marked so I can then refer to it.
All right.
Thank you. So, Your Honor, to do this quickly chronologically, so we have a hoodie sweatshirt that was brought into the criminalist, Ms. Hartnett, with the back of the hoodie with no holes on it. The criminalist makes cuts to the back of the hoodie, makes cuts to the front of the hoodie. The exhibit, Your Honor, depicts those. There's a chain of custody document that describes the chain of custody for the hoodie and the cuts in the chronology. And of course, we have Exhibit 88, which is the hoodie. So, what Mr. Brennan did, and I'm now pulling Exhibit 88, he holds up the back of the hoodie, which has cuts in the back from the criminalist, somebody from the Commonwealth, a witness in this case, Ms. Hartnett, she's testified, and Mr. Brennan has indicated he wants her to come back and testify, which we welcome. And now what we have is we have holes in the back of the sweatshirt that were dramatically held up and confronted with Dr. Wolf, and then the jury sees it. With the clear, unmistakable, purposeful intention of having the jury conclude that these holes could have come from events on January 29th of 2022, when in fact the Commonwealth well knows from its own documents, from its own criminal list, that those holes in the back were caused by their criminalist as part of their examination and sampling of the hoodie. What could be more egregious? What could be more misleading than that? And what could be more important for a context than the alleged collision that never occurred? That's the topic before some of the most significant and probative witnesses in this trial that the Commonwealth has been attacking from the jump of pretrial. They picked the most opportune, sensitive time to pull this stuff. This is intentional. This is irremediable. This is on the key issue of this case, whether there was any collision at all. On its own, Your Honor, on its own, this is a mistrial with prejudice. But I add to that what just happened, and I'm not going to repeat or go into other than to reference. This comes on just mere days after the Commonwealth raised the specter of absence of DNA on the same hoodie sweatshirt without having the criminalist excuse me, Ms. Kuhn from UC Davis come in. I know Your Honor already ruled on that.
Right,
and
so let's move along from
Right,
that.
that's what, and I'm going to come back to this. Why is this occurring, Your Honor? Why is this happening? The Commonwealth has no case. They have no collision. They are desperate and are trying to create evidence of specters of collision where the evidence doesn't support it. So what have we come to? We've come to the manufacture of evidence. We've come to, incredibly, taking a hoodie, a key piece of evidence in this case, and holding up to Dr. Wolf, the ARCA expert, to try to make it seem like Dr. Wolf didn't do his job. You didn't account for these holes. How could you be a credible accident reconstructionist when you talk about some holes, but you don't talk about these holes? Knowing all along the holes that Attorney Brennan is trying to impeach Dr. Wolf on were caused by the Commonwealth's own criminalists as part of sampling. I don't believe one could come up with more misleading, misdirecting elucidation of testimony than this on the key issue in the case. We have irrefutable, objective evidence, and I will state that it's more than interesting that none of these exhibits that Your Honor now has marked for identification were put in evidence by the Commonwealth. Isn't it some coincidence that these are the one, and the only one of the, with regard to the hoodie, the back of it's not in, all of the rest of them are, but these aren't. Your Honor, I think there is one and only one conclusion, in that this is intentional, that it is a matter of such significance and of such misconduct and intentional that it merits the sanction of a mistrial with prejudice. The amount of effort, the amount of work, I can't even begin to think to remedy this in front of the jury, to go backwards on this. That should not befall the defense. That should befall the prosecution. Ms. Reed, again, is entitled, like every other defendant in this wonderful Commonwealth, to a fair trial. The prosecution is supposed to be held to a higher standard, to do justice, to create a fair trial. This is the antithesis of a fair trial. Ms. Reed's rights under the Constitution and the Declaration of Rights have once again been trampled on, and it is becoming evidently clear the more desperate the prosecution gets because it can't prove its theory, including its own medical examiner can't support them, that they're now resorting to conduct like this. Your Honor, at some point, this has to come to an end. At some point, Ms. Reed's rights have to be protected. At some point, confidence in the judicial system, the public's confidence in the judicial system, that prosecutors will conduct themselves with their duty to present a fair trial. That has to be enforced at some point for Ms. Reed to receive the fair trial that she and every other defendant in this Commonwealth is entitled to.
All right, thank you. Mr. Brennan.